Hey everyone, welcome back! Alright, so, new topic today. We're going to talk about relationships in fiction because I love a great relationship, and even audiences who know nothing about writing love them too, right? So, I wanted to look at, when I was doing this post originally, I really wanted to break down how to craft great relationships that people love, which is the point of this video today, right? So, relationship as a character, crafting duos, trios, groups that readers can't resist. So, there are loads of resources about creating great characters, right? There's no shortage on that in the writing world. But when it comes to creating great relationships, either the perfect tag team, the favorite couple, the best friends, the writing world is lacking, I feel like. Whether your characters are romantic partners, co-workers, best friends, siblings, what have you, audiences eat up wonderfully crafted duo, trios, groups, whatever. So in BBC's Sherlock, people love Sherlock and Watson's relationship so much that there's an entire fan community that roots for them to actually be together romantically. I'm a huge fan of the X-Files, grew up on it. Agents Mulder and Scully, I love them so much. They work so well together. They just belong together. They're one of my favorite, if not my favorite, fictional couples of all time. And then I was once watching Harry Potter with someone who turned to me and said, I love Harry, Ron, and Hermione and how they all fit together. So, some kinds of relationships would, some that are so well done, like they would still be entertaining to watch if the whole story revolved around the characters like going to the grocery store. Their relationship is that amusing. In fact, one of my favorite X-Files episodes of all time is where Mulder and Scully have to go undercover as a married couple living this normal life together, and it's freaking hilarious. So this video is going to talk about some of the key factors in creating this effect. How do you create this in your fiction? How do you get this great tag team that we just can't get enough of viewers? Okay, so here are some things that I have found to make this happen. So the first one is give them a history. So almost every lovable relationship has a sense of history about it. It's either already developed when the story starts, and in that case you're going to have to make references back to it, or this history develops with the story. So I touched on some of this idea a little bit when I was talking about humor. We love when characters have an amusing relationship that goes, quote, way back, right? So in The Office, we love that Jim and Dwight have a history of pranks that stretch back before episode 1 even begins. It's funny, right? And you can refer back to history. So in your own story, you can refer back to history that's already happened between characters in your story, like, before the story started. Or you can start creating a history for them from the beginning, right? If they've only just met. So with Sherlock and X-Files, we're there when Watson meets Sherlock and when Scully meets Mulder. And by the way, you can make their first encounter amusing itself, but I'll get to that later. But as the story continues, they start to gain a kind of history. So to use this technique, you just need to refer back to something, whether it happened on page or off page. If you refer to something that happened on page, the reader knows it, so it can build on itself and sort of work as an inside joke, right? On the other hand, though, if you refer to something that happens off page, it makes your story and relationship feel like more full and like grounded. It's like a fuller relationship, and fuller story and characters, because you get the sense that it's bigger than what you can fit in the book or on the page. So often, the referral, when you're referring back, it's told with a humorous tone where characters are remembering the event together. But that's not a hard and fast rule. It doesn't have to be like that. So there's this example from Sherlock, okay? Watson, he's like, don't do that. Sherlock, do what? The look. Look? You're doing the look again. Now I can't see it, can I? So John indicates the mirror and Sherlock looks. Sherlock's like, it's my face. Yes, and it's doing a thing. You're doing a we both know what's really going on here face. Well, we do. No, I don't, which is why I find the face so annoying. So the reference to Sherlock's look indicates a history of it. This example happens to be an off-page reference, right? Or I guess you would say off-screen referral. The audience hasn't seen this topic discussed on the screen, but it's clear from the dialogue that Sherlock and Watson have talked about it. Off-page referrals are a great way to build a relationship in a small amount of time or space in a story, which is perfect for this TV series Sherlock because episodes can jump across months or years at a time. So you're filling in some of that. In the X-Files, Mulder has this habit of sharpening pencils and throwing them up at the ceiling so that they get stuck. And Scully notices this, and every time she does, we as viewers kind of get this warm, fuzzy feeling because it's like, oh, things never change, you know? Or at least that's what happens to me. And then when their relationship is like solid and strong and Mulder gets abducted and Scully looks up at the ceiling and sees all these pencils stuck in it, we get a kind of twinge because it's like there's this history and this history has like concluded. And so things did change and we wish they didn't, and the pencils stuck in the ceiling remind us of how painful that is. So this history happens on screen. I mean, we know that Mulder is doing this even off screen, that he's throwing pencils at the ceiling, but the audience is part of the history as it develops. The advantage of doing this, of having us be part of the history several times, is that when that particular history seems to conclude or things change, it hits the audience harder in the gut. We can only get that kind of gut-wrenching emotional response at that level if we've been participants in it. Alright, so the next part is that the characters know each other too well, okay? So, if this tactic follows up nicely with the history one. We love it when characters know each other too well. The characters may know the other person better than that person knows themselves. So, it's like with Harry, Ron, and Hermione. As the series progresses, whenever Hermione is about to have a Hermione moment, where she goes off to inform Harry and Ron about something she read about, Harry and Ron exchange smiles. They know Hermione so well that they can sense where she is going and they share in it. They actually both come to find her scholarly moments very endearing, and it even uses that word in the later in the series that they find what she does is just very endearing because it's so they know her so well. In the movies, we hear them finish her sentences, right? There's a part where Hermione goes, I had some questions, so I decided to go to, and Harry and Ron say, the library. And Sherlock comes to know John better than John knows himself. It's Sherlock that has to tell John that he's attracted to psychotic people, right? And John doesn't see it in himself. In some ways, John also comes to know Sherlock better than Sherlock knows himself. Or he picks up on things about Sherlock even when Sherlock tries to hide it from him. And at first, The Office might not seem to fit this category, but there are relationships for sure. They're not like buddies, but honestly, that show is all about relationships. I mean, look at the story concept. It's a show about an office of a paper company. Not much of a driving plot there. It's the relationships that the story is about. And if they got 10 years out of that show, then there's definitely some things about character relationships that we can learn from it. So, there's a particular scene in The Office where, so Jim knows Dwight so well, he knows exactly what to do to get a specific reaction out of Dwight. Jim knows exactly how to prank him. So likewise, Pam knows Michael so well, she can foresee the mess he's going to get himself into before it happens. Then, both Jim and Pam together, sometimes, work to deal with Dwight and Michael, either by pranking them or when it gets down to it, lending them a hand. When it gets down to it, because John and Sherlock know each other so well, and because Pam and Jim know Dwight and Michael so well, they are there for them, they help them, and they protect them when it counts, okay? And you can cut out the banter and the history. If you cut that all out, they have got each other's backs when things are serious, regardless of how they may act otherwise. John even tries to protect Sherlock from a broken heart. Sherlock likewise tries to protect John by faking a suicide, right? Alright, so the next point is they share their vulnerability. I'm a big believer in characters having vulnerable moments. And the vulnerable moments between these characters almost feel sacred sometimes, I feel like. In the X-Files, Scully really wants to be a mother. But because of a history of alien experimentation, she can't have children. And Mulder and Scully have to deal with they deal with her personal issue as coworkers and as friends. And at this point in the series, they aren't romantically together. I mean, they don't get romantically together for a long time, but they've grown close through their experiences. So there's a moment in the series where Scully has the opportunity to possibly get pregnant through in vitro, and so she comes to Mulder and asks if he will be the donor. And she's completely vulnerable in that moment, right? And Mulder jokes about it a little bit, not out of cruelty, right? But I think to lighten the seriousness of the moment, perhaps so Scully feels more comfortable. But in the end, he agrees. Unfortunately, the pregnancy doesn't take, and Scully is completely heartbroken over it. But Mulder is there for her. He shares her vulnerability. He shares a part of her that perhaps no one else even knows about, that she's even dealing with these things that she struggles with. And that's what I love about great relationship. There is this space that the characters share that is like sacred. And as the series goes on, and as X-Files goes on, and Scully struggles more with her desire to be a mother, Mulder is always there for her. He's got her back. And when he struggles with things, she's got his. But this doesn't have to be as serious or as personal as dealing with like infertility, right? Here and there in the office, we see vulnerable moments between Jim, Pam, and Dwight. When Pam is having a difficult time, Dwight indirectly, he makes a point to lighten her load, though he'll never admit to it, and Pam herself will never know about it. He has done that in that show. So you can play with that too. You can have open, vulnerable moments where the characters are completely vulnerable in front of each other, like Scully and Mulder, or you can have closed, vulnerable moments where one character kind of sees, spies, catches on the vulnerability of the other, and does something to help him or her, maybe when she's not looking, right? Like with Dwight and Pam. So in these vulnerable moments, it's okay if the character opens up indirectly. I mean, most people are indirect when they're vulnerable. It's very hard to be direct about sensitive things. To kick it up a notch, you can go with, so these characters, they know each other so well that when one is being indirect, the other knows exactly what they're really saying. And that's something that's pretty cool to play around with. Alright, looks like I'm not going to be able to fit all of them into this one video, so come back next time and we'll continue along on this list about how you can write great character relationships. Thanks, and follow, subscribe, all that great stuff. Get my latest writing tips at septembercfox.com. Happy writing!